Hello, and welcome to another week of the Story Darks podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are wrapping up our discussion of The Bunker with Volume 4, or the last few issues, or if this is your first episode, somehow make sure you've read the entire series before. There is like that thing in comics, like every issue is someone's first issue, and every episode has the potential to be someone's first.
We don't recommend that here. Yeah,
I don't recommend it, but I do always try to caveat that, like, here's the concept. We're not a recap. We're a discussion podcast. It's like a book club, and we don't spoil beyond the one we're talking about, which I'm sure is nauseating for all the regular listeners. But, I think it would not strike me as crazy as someone who discovers the podcast in their feed and it's like, The Bunker, I read that, and they click on the most recent episode. So anyway,
that's fair, but it does say Volume 4 there, and whether or not you have any idea how many volumes there are in a series, you pretty safe bet that if you're seeing something that says Volume 4, there are probably at least 3 that precede it.
Yes.
Just going on a limb there, but yeah, Volume 4, the last part of the last segment of the story. It's issues 15 through 19. I should say off the top here that it looks like they did bring in a colorist for these last issues. I'm assuming that's probably for a time crunch issue. Give to maybe help Joe Infurnari, work through, kind of get issues done. He still drew and lettered the whole thing, but these last 5 issues were colored by Gonzalo Duarte. And I got to say though, I'm sure the mandate was in this case, mimic the style that had come before. This isn't a situation like we saw last volume where they brought in
right, yeah, this is not a
for one. Yeah.
This is not an
they brought a whole
interstitial
team for one issue, exactly. Yeah, where they wanted to be visually distinct. Here, I think very much the idea was replicate what has been done previously to help kind of finish the series. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Nothing jumped out at me as being wildly different. I think Gonzalo Duarte did a great job.
Yeah, if I set the challenge for myself, I think I could probably spot some distinction, although colors I think are a little easier to be a chameleon with, because you kind of say like, here's the full range of the palette.
Yeah.
And, there's still going to be different expressions. Every color has their own style. Yeah. Usually not a bad thing. But in this case, when you're a pinch hitter.
Yeah. And you still have moments, which I'm sure are in the script directions, right? Where characters may be in color, but the background is still in black and white, just in pencils. Yeah. Because that's something that Infurnari did throughout the entire run to help with emphasis and accentuate story points and things like that. So what's in focus, what's out of focus, what is colored, what isn't colored. I'm sure those things were not left up to Duarte to do. Those were directions because he had seen what had come before, and again, you want to keep the same visual aesthetic. So yeah, when you're reading through, I think in this case, this is a situation where you don't want to stand out, where you don't want to come in and kind of make your presence known here. This is all about keeping consistency here, and I think it totally works because nothing jumps out to me, at least, as being like wildly egregious, as that clearly looks like it wasn't colored by Joe Infurnari. Nothing jumps out at me as being like horrific in that way. So I think it's great. And again, the nature of the industry, the nature of the machine of cranking out monthly books, it's hard to keep the same team going, and especially when it's a team of 2, right? When you got one guy who's doing all the artwork, the layouts, the pencils, the colors, the lettering, he's doing all of it. That's a lot to hand to somebody. So to do as many issues as he did is always a great testament to the kind of work. But yeah, I'm sure at some point it just becomes, hey man, we got to get these done here. We're in the home stretch, so you bring someone in to help ease the load just a little bit.
Yeah. Story itself, ending itself, what did you think? We say all the time endings are hard, and I think earlier in the series I indicated perhaps some similarity between the necessary eventual ending of this and something like A Time Before Time. Not necessarily the loop of it all, but the notion that this is the last issue, no matter how many issues came before it. Like,
Yeah.
whether this
Well,
stretched for 50 issues, this
yeah.
was going to be the end.
It feels that way from to me. And I will say the part that I liked that it ended well, especially given what was presented in this arc, the idea that this isn't the first try at this.
Yes.
The idea that's been revealed story wise, which I
just have to say,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
as devil's advocate, being a contrarian, do you believe her? Like there is, like, I think we're meant to, but I think there is always that, like, there's always someone in the book club who's like, "Oh, you believed that evil older version?"
I think in this case we are meant to because of the presence of older Amma.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
I think by
I mean,
her
I
presence,
bet hook, line, and sinker. I'm just saying.
Yeah. No.
Someone's going to ask.
There is absolutely a case to. There is nothing presented that that says you should trust anything older Grady, older Natasha say, right?
Right.
Sorry, nothing to say you should trust what their motivations are and what they think is going to happen, because multiple times they say when it's just the two of them, right? When they're not trying to convince anybody else, multiple times when the two of them basically be like, we don't know what's going to happen. And that's kind of the whole point of what they believe this exercise is that we don't know what's going to happen, but we know what did happen. So anything that's different than that has got to be an improvement, or at the very least, it can't be any worse. And they keep saying that over and over again. And in this volume, we find out that if this doesn't work, and it can't get any worse, even if it's not better, it's not going to get any worse. And even if it's not any better, we can just go back a little further in time and try again. And that's revealed here that they've tried multiple times, and each time they just go further back in the past, right? So I presumably the first time they just probably maybe they jump back to right before kind of the apocalypse happened. And then that didn't work, so we go back a little further to maybe before the breakthrough, or right before Grady gets elected president, or something like that. You get a sense that they've tried this multiple times, and this version that we're watching is them jumping back to that moment, as we said, when they're on the cusp of adulthood, right? This idea that presumably they've all just graduated college and they're all starting their new lives the next day. So that's kind of like this nexus point in your life. So I'm a little torn on that specific story Mechanic. But what I liked about what this story did was that this story ended that cycle. You know, yes. That it ends with older Natasha going back again a little bit further and having that conversation with Grady and trying something different again. You know, her giving whatever impassioned speech about living your life, don't lie to yourself or anybody else. The idea of like just being a good person and hoping that changes. It's sort of like, it reminded me a little bit of Inception. The idea of going back and having to plant the most simplest form of the idea.
Yeah,
you know, as opposed to what they tried here, which is like direct interference and saying, no, you have to do this, and this. And here, that ending with her just being like, let me just try to change how you see the world, and maybe that's enough. And we don't get to see if that works or not.
No, in fact, we get,
and I'm fine with that, because it closes this loop, and it allows the reader to think what's going on and think about what might happen. And there could be more story, you know. There could be about following what the ripple effects of this cycle are, but I'm glad that wasn't included into this story. Does that make sense? I'm glad that this story was just one cycle. Now that we know there have been multiple cycles, that part I liked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like the ending overall. Yeah. And I would like, my main thought was, in the hands of a lesser writer, there would be one more page where young Grady gives a knowing look at the reader, or says something profound as if he's been instantly changed, and we all have a peace of mind that like, oh, it worked. It's totally going to break the cycle now.
Sure.
Whereas he left it just a page shy of that. So you see like the seed has been planted, no idea if it's going to work or not. It could go exactly the same as it did before. It's hard to believe it could be any worse than how it was when they kept trying to put their thumb on the scale and micromanage the past. So I liked that. It actually, the biggest comp I thought of with the ending was AD After Death, Lemire and Snyder. That's a very similar. That's memory instead of time. Time travel, but it's a different type of time travel where you just live forever and you can't even remember things that happened to you 100 years ago.
But you're right. Years ago. It's the same idea, right? Of
and they're pleading with him like different. They're pleading with him like, you've done this before, you've escaped before, you've gotten on that boat before, and you're going to turn around and come back. So why don't we just skip that part and come back? And the last page is just his foot leaving the shore into the water. I love that, and I do owe it to this creative team to say that this came first, I believe. If only by a year or two, but
the ending this went to what, like 2015, maybe 2016. So yeah, it would. I mean,
I was gonna say, like AD started like 2014, 2015.
Well, in terms of when it was
three oversized
when it was published, it's probably like 2015, 2016. Yeah, so maybe around the same time. But it is that same sort of. I mean, these are similar ideas. We're not saying that anyone's copied anything. These are similar ideas, and it's one of the kind of core ideas about time travel, right? And I think that's what this book explores. It explores a very, very core mechanic of we see them go back in time again, much like Back to the Future, right? Well, that's unintentional, but having direct influence on the past and seeing and thinking that's what changes, because I have foreknowledge of what's coming, and if you do this, this is going to happen. And the younger version being like, well, how do you know? Because you weren't here the last time, right? So how do you know not being here changed anything? Versus the idea of, well, what if we just try a hands-off approach, which is what we assume Natasha has done here in this at the end of issue 19. That one interaction
to Natasha, I think the interesting thing is that it felt more like a realization than a giving up.
No. For her,
like, yes. She felt like, well, not only is this the only play left for me, this is what we should have done before, rather than like, I don't think it's a desperate Hail Mary.
Well, no, I don't think it's desperate, but I didn't read it as being like, this is what we should have done the whole time. I read it a little more that there was a level of resignation that like, we've tried everything else and this is the last thing we haven't tried. Not as a Hail Mary of just like, maybe we need to try something different.
Right. Yeah. She's not like, let's deploy just chaos and see if chaos creates a different outcome.
Yeah. But
she's like, if the fundamental problem is who Grady is, then we need to change who Grady is rather than changing individual decisions of Grady, because the tide of Grady will still go this way, even if we, micromanage different decisions.
Maybe it's the understanding, the realization that just who he is as a person is going to be overwhelming, and so trying to instead of trying to influence him by directing his actions, they finally realized that that's not going to work. So again, I don't think it's a matter of like her thinking we should have done this the whole time and I've been overruled, or I don't think desperation is there, but I do think there is a level of realization of like, well, nothing else. We've done this X amount of times already. And every time the end result is, well, we got to go back and try again because this didn't work. We know we failed again. So what's the last thing we haven't tried? Maybe the last thing we haven't tried is a hands-off approach. Is this
right? Here you're not putting the burden of knowing and managing the future on the past version.
Yes.
That's that's part of the strategy, but I think the ultimate strategy is what if the leaders of the world were better people? And
I think that's the commentary. Yeah.
right. Yeah. It's like, what would that change the course of history? And I think that's the question the series asks. It doesn't answer it. It just says,
it kind of does it answer it by does it answer it by showing the opposite, by being like, look at these terrible people and how they screw up the world? Does it
right.
answer? Is it implicitly answered?
It's either implicitly answered, or they're just saying literally nothing you do matters. It's the river, the stone in the river thing.
Yeah.
Of like, the river of human behavior is surging so far in this direction. You can disrupt it modestly, but any little pebble you throw in the river is just going to be overrun and eventually totally mitigated.
That's pretty nihilistic. I don't know.
I don't think that's
quite
where
that
he
dark,
is.
But yeah,
well,
but
I'm not inclined to read something that dark if there are options. I think this book leaves you with options, which is what I like about the ending.
Yes, and I get the feeling, given what was shown in the previous 18 issues throughout the series, I get the feeling it's meant to be hopeful. Because we get that one last scene there. We don't get the scene after that, but the last thing we get is Grady talking to Billy, right, and him just kind of saying like, "I love you," this idea of maybe coming to terms and being honest about how he feels and who he is at an earlier time in his life. And I think that's maybe meant to show a bit of a spark that at the very least, we don't know if we don't know if Grady has changed, the future's changed, but we've seen Billy do something that presumably he hasn't done before. So there is an immediate response, but we don't know what the ripple of that response is. But I think them showing us that older Natasha's talk with him, he had at least a knee-jerk reaction in the positive route to that right away, I think is meant to leave the reader with the idea that, okay, maybe this at least has a chance of going better.
Right.
Which means, in my mind, it's more hopeful, it's more positive.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, if you can put yourself in the simulation mode of reading this the first time, when did you feel like, okay, we're rounding the corner to the end? If you didn't have the foreknowledge of there's only 19 issues.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, that is tough because I read it in completed form, so I did know.
So did I. But
yeah.
I felt that once old Grady was murdered.
Yes.
I felt like, okay, that's not a player you're going to take off the board if you've got a lot of story left to tell. And I'm not saying it's also not impossible. Like, this story could have kept going easily another 10, 20, or they could have done, what I think a lot of publishers would have done now, which is, it ends at 19, but we start the cycle over again with young Grady, who's just had that encounter as issue 1 of volume 2.
And now it's the bunker, the return, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Number 1.
Yes. However you name concentric circles coming out of the out of the center.
Oh no, but I agree. When you kill off old Grady and simultaneously kind of see what all the machinations of older Natasha are, including the reveal of older Amma and what her role has been throughout the series as like the lead investigator of all the kids, really, as by the end they're all in jail. Once you play that card, I think you're saying this story is wrapping up.
Right.
They're not that there's no coming back, but again, this version of the story.
Right. They're laying their cards on the table.
Yeah.
All of these closely guarded secrets.
Yes,
most of what has happened in this story has been catalyzed by old Grady. And so for him to die means you're removing the catalytic figure. That being said, he put so many things in motion that obviously they're going to stay in motion. You know, it's no longer depending on him to propel forward. Yeah. But his meddling with it was kind of the origin of this whole story arc.
Yeah, you're right. It's the engine that moved everything, because old Grady influencing young Grady is how the other four of them end up where they are. It's because he's the one. Young Grady is the one who is like fully bought it. We talked about it last week. Maybe he has some reluctance, but he ultimately does concede and do the things that old Grady says. So whether or not his feelings at that point are kind of irrelevant, because he ends up doing it anyway. But everything that the Gradys do together is what ends, and sometimes old Grady by himself, but young Grady not stepping up to the plate and trying to stop old Grady is how everyone else ends up in jail. It's how his actions are dictating, in a way, what's happening with the rest of the story. Even though we see that Natasha does have kind of plans within plans, but you're right. Once old Grady is out, thus meaning young Grady is left on his own. The person up at this point who really hasn't made any decisions on his own, like once they find the bunker, young Grady has made no decisions on his own. Everything he's done has been under the influence of the older version of himself. Right. So you're right. Once he's gone, the narrative kind of propulsion is lost out of the story, and not lost in a bad way, but it does signify like we're coming into the end here. We're going to find out what this was all about, and the series is going to wrap. And I think they gave themselves some good room at the end to kind of tell that story and land it. It wasn't like a end of story arc reveal. So I like that it played out that way. Again, some of the specific mechanics, like having the reveal of older Amma being the cop and having come back as well, that she was brought back like months before and was undercover and all that. Like, I'm not super big on that reveal. I'm not super big on that kind of thing there. I'm curious how you felt about it, if you had feelings one way or the other.
I didn't care. Well, okay. So if I were not reading in this format, I were reading in real time, I might care a lot. When I know I'm closing in on the end and they're kind of just emptying the chamber of like, here's all the story things, it kind of felt like, okay, well, if that really mattered, it would have come out in more dramatic fashion. But here it just kind of feels like it's not an ending of a comic. I think it ended sooner than they wanted it to, but it did not. The ending did not catch them off guard. They had 4 issues here to say, okay, let's get all the stuff out, show them everything we were working with, because there's nothing more obnoxious than dumping all that in the last oversized issue, because you just found out that's your last issue.
Yeah, because all you have left. Yeah,
that was absolutely not the case. But
you brought up a good point there. I'm wondering if I'm putting myself into the mindset of reading this monthly as it was coming out in single issues and not knowing that we were coming to the end. Not knowing,
that's the key.
I would have
thought, oh my gosh, it's such rich storytelling to be giving us so much every issue.
I think I would have liked it, because you lose old Grady, and so you lose the old Grady, old Natasha pair up, right? In terms of the schemers, but then you gain Natasha from the reader standpoint. You gain the buddy cop version now with old Natasha and old Amma, right? And so it's like you're replacing that, and you're like, oh well, so the two of them now can manipulate, because now we see what she was doing as the investigator, and it's like, oh, they're setting up for like the next part of the story. And then having, if the series then ended like a few issues later, I think I would have been angry at that, being like, well, then why'd you drop that here at the end? But you're right. Going into this, knowing that I'm reading the last volume, it didn't bother me as much as I think it could have. It bothered me thinking like, well, knowing this was the end, like, might have been cool to know that earlier. Like, does it change the story at all? Does it change the story at all if that's dropped like somewhere in volume 3, like after Heidi is going through everything and she's been arrested too? Like,
or if that had been the interstitial, like her traveling back and arriving when she did, and then you realize at the end of the interstitial, it ends with her in an interrogation room or something, and you're like,
with her,
"Oh my god, it just sunk up." Yeah,
her in the first time she's down with Billy. Yeah. Oh, that'd be. You know what? I would have liked that. If that would have been
the best.
That had been issue 10, which would have effectively been the middle issue. Again, although as we said last week, I think brothers really liked that interstitial.
I wouldn't get rid of that. I'm just saying if you had more interstitials,
that issue, as we said, could go anywhere. Because as we discovered last week, it in the published trade, it came at the end of the arc versus how it was really published in the beginning. But you're right. If in that moment, after, because volume 2 ends with old Natasha and old Grady, as we find out, giving younger Heidi a simulated stroke, right, and taking her to, as we find out, to Kansas City to quote unquote murder her uncle, but ending on that cliffhanger, and then coming back, and if issue 10 had been, this backstory of Alma and seeing where she came from and all that, and giving the reader that knowledge, and then informing us as we see her continually interact with all the younger versions of the characters as they one by one end up in jail for various things, and giving the reader that satisfaction over the characters in the story. I think that would have been really cool. I like that idea. Now I'm quasi mad we didn't get that. Darn.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I've said like before, like I wish I would love to write a comic someday, but if I could take any job in the world, I think I would love being a comic editor. Like someone who comes into the room clean, you hear the idea and you say, what if you tweak this, and then right? What if you drop that interstitial and do this and this and this? Yeah. I'm not changing the story. I'm just changing the storytelling. And because I think more often than not, those tend to be my insights are not, it's more about the form for me than the actual beats. Like I'm not good at coming up with the beats.
I'm right there with you. It's about process. It's about the order of things, and
Nightly News is the one I was thinking of in my head of like, I totally fixed that book when we talked about it.
And not throwing shade on Fialkov and Infurnari, or any creators.
So, I'm certainly not in a position to throw shade at Jonathan Hickman either.
But I think in general, when you look at creatives, especially when you're dealing with stories, kind of timey-wimey stories, or anything where part of the story mechanism is withholding information and revealing information, some sort of mystery box, anything sort of thing. I think sometimes creatives, by their nature, can be too clever for their own good, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, like they're so far in it sometimes that things that they try to reveal, something like How I Met Your Mother, when you build a shot of a mystery box and you think you're being real clever, and maybe you are kind of clever, but when you've got enough people following your story, someone's going to be more clever than you are, and kind of the hubris of being like, well, no, we're still going to. This thing is going to work because in my mind, I can see how it plays out, but you're not thinking of it like a reader because you're too far in the forest. So I think a good editor in that way is someone that can come in and throw those ideas out there. Yeah, you're right. Not about changing the story, not being like, this is bad, it doesn't work. Just having someone with a different set of eyes who isn't living in the mechanics like the creators are, who aren't seeing the 4-dimensional chess, and just someone from the outside being like, well, what if that piece went over here instead? And maybe a suggestion like that's enough to just reorder the way they're thinking about something, to help maybe maximize the impact, I guess, or something like that. But yeah, I think it's a way to plus a story, that is kind of specifically hinged on reveals and on mysteries and things like that. I think having that extra eyes or set of eyes, or multiple set of eyes, can just be helpful.
I appreciate editing in every form. Like the thing that always would break my heart in grad school is I would have like a really great sentence or idea that would spur me to write the paper I needed to write. And then my now wife at the time, who was frequently my editor then and now, would like see that original sentence shoehorned in somewhere, and she'd just kind of draw a line through it. And I'm like, no, that was the whole impetus of the thing. And she's like, right, but it's actually now the worst sentence here. It doesn't fit anymore with where the paper ended up going, and what you have is better. But I understand that, like, being initially attached to the initial idea so much that you're reluctant to pluck it.
Yep. But that is a natural part of the creative process, I think, right? Yeah. And the idea of sometimes needing to kill your darlings and not hold anything too tight in that way. Again, not thinking, remembering that maybe you're not as clever as you think you are. Doesn't mean you're not clever overall, but maybe that idea you had, that structure you had, all those all the steps you had in your head, maybe you don't need half of them. Maybe as you get working, because the thing has to be a living document, right? As you're making it, as you're collaborating with it, as you're working through it, you have to be willing to adapt what you're doing. And again, we're not saying that's happening here, but there are other ways, I think, because I think this book would have been enriched if we got it. There's a lot of cool things they could have done in the story for the last 2 volumes if the readers were in on the fact that older Alma was back there, that she was a player, that she wasn't just some rando that these people had to keep dealing with over and over again, who was always questioning, being like, what you're saying is crazy, yada, yada, yada. I can't believe you're doing this, yada, yada, yada.
And we, the reader, using her for exposition. Exposition we already know, and she already knows. And the person telling the exposition already knows, and it's like, who's this for? This is just a ruse on the reader now.
Exactly. There's a lot of, I guess she's supposed to be audience avatar in a way, except that we've watched the characters. So we know the bunker exists. Like we know old Grady is back. So we have more information than than her character is presented as, because she's learning this for the first time. When Billy and Heidi, all them tell them this is what's going on, she's the one who has to be like, what? Like, that sounds crazy. When we, the reader, already are ahead of her. So if we were on the same level as her and we knew it was an act, and then we could read intention into the question she's asking, right? We could read intention into the kind of doubt she might vocalize in one of these in one of these meetings, one of these sit downs, and have an understanding as to why she's questioning Billy or Heidi in a certain way. That when she's asking a certain question, she's doing it for a specific reason. That it's part of some larger plan that her and older Natasha have, or something like that. There's a level, an extra level of intrigue that could have existed. Again, had the reader been given that knowledge beforehand.
Anyway,
but I guess again, we don't want to critique the comic that isn't there, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, yes, and like I think we also talk about this a lot too. That if I were given the comic I wanted that I'm describing here, I would have been like, after I read it, I would have been like, well, I could have come up with that. So it's really damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It is
when you're dealing with me. Yeah. So I pity any writer who writes for me, even though, I give them money and support them, but I'm just going to gripe about everything as I go. Yeah. So, I mean, how would you rate, how do you think this ending stacks up in the pantheon of storied arcs endings?
I mean, I think it's a good ending. I think it's a good ending. I don't think it's a spectacular one. Again, there's a very good chance that we never cover a comic with a better ending than Paper Girls.
I was just going to say, it's not Paper Girls, but
it's entirely possible that that ending is so note perfect in my mind, and in a lot of ways
we started with it. Well, yeah,
but in a lot of ways, it is similar to what we see here, right? We return back to the past. We return back to our characters at the quote unquote start of the story, right? They have gone through this whole thing that they don't know anything about, but we see that their actions are a little bit different. You know, we see that whether or not they know, and in this case, younger Grady has no idea who old Natasha is. He doesn't know that is actually Natasha from the future. He has no idea. But Paper Girls ends with that note of like, maybe we can get, maybe these girls can get something a little bit different out of this, something a little more fulfilling, something they didn't have before. It's not the experience they went through by traveling through time and doing all that stuff and fighting some crazy war, but the idea that they have been changed by this experience, whether or not they know it or not. It still happened, and it is a hopeful, beautiful kind of ending here.
Right, it's the most beautiful ending that you can have.
Yeah.
In this story where Max still is going to die early. It's like they didn't fix any of those problems.
And
it's so many lesser books would have been like, I don't care why we started time traveling, we're going to stop Mac from dying. And
because
it's a lesser story.
Yeah, because it's not about that. It's in the living there, right? And you know, so you don't know what's going to happen the next day with these girls, but you just get a sense that their lives are going to be different and going to be better because they're going to have each other in it now for however long that is. So you get a sense that they've been changed. The Bunker, I think, presents a similar idea. It presents this similar idea of hope, and maybe that's why I read it in that way. The sense that this one interaction maybe has changed Grady enough, so he doesn't end the world. He doesn't become terrible. That maybe it's just enough that it's good enough that he's going to change. So there, I see them on similar levels there, on similar notes. They end on similar notes. I mean, I do think Paper Girls is one of the best books published in the past like 15, 20 years. Like straight up, it is absolutely one of my favorites. So it's hard to compare things to that, and it's unfair to. But I don't dislike the end. Again, some of the mechanics of like, again, I don't know. I think I said this a little earlier. I didn't come back to it. I'll come back to it now. I wasn't hugely big on the idea of the reveal that we've done this multiple times and it's failed each time. You know, Natasha being like, hey, we just keep trying and keep failing. I wasn't a huge fan of that. But as I said, I was a fan of the way they then use that in the ending, you know, to just say we're ending this cycle. That reveal of this is just another version of the loop that we've tried and failed at for however many times before. I wasn't a huge fan of that reveal. That this wasn't the first time, you know?
Yeah.
But again, once you accept that, I did like how they used that in the end for old Natasha to go back one more time and say, okay, let's try this a different way now. And so we're going to end this cycle that this wheel keeps turning. And even though we go back and try to change things, nothing has worked. You know, the wheel keeps turning. And so that idea of breaking the wheel and going back one last time and trying something different, I liked the use of it in that way. But the introduction of that mechanism, I wasn't a huge fan of. Because that feels a little bit like a cheat. Like it lessens in a way, to me, what you've read in the previous issues a little bit. In knowing that this isn't going back in time, wasn't a one-time chance to make the future better. You know,
right?
It was simply a chance to make the future better, and didn't get it right. Try it again. It lessens the impact of the time travel to me in that way.
Yeah, although I mean,
a little bit.
I'm thinking of it in the like the comp you gave last volume. I think was Live, Die, Repeat, which when you look at it on that scale, it's like, well, I didn't try that many times.
But that is true. That is
it's
true.
all what you compare it to. The fact that they're going back so far in time, because it's like, why are they doing a total reset every single time?
Yeah.
Couldn't they go back to the last time they think it was on track and fix the most recent decision? But the answer is no. They go back and reset the entire thing every time.
Yeah, well, I think the assumption also is they probably tried that. They tried to jump back a little bit and be like, don't release the crop. Well, too late for that. Still, okay, well then, don't go work at a spot. Well, too late, can't do that. So you still work at a spot,
I kind of read it as they're going back to the beginning and like trying to throw a perfect game. And as soon as they give up a walk, they're like, well, got to restart now.
Okay.
Like, I don't think they play the tape through the end every time.
Oh no, I know. They definitely don't. But I read it as every time they fail, they go back further in time. Like a little bit further, so a little bit earlier in their younger version selves to try and change the future. Like they jump back a little bit, that didn't work. Yeah, as soon as it looks like it's heading in the same direction, nope, cut it. Back in the bunker, do it again. But they incrementally work their way back until they got to the point where their characters are in the beginning of the story, when they're on that one last day together, the five of them going out to the woods to bury a time capsule. And then, because we see then when old Natasha jumps again, she jumps to like a half hour before then, when Grady's out in the woods by himself before the rest of his friends show up. So the idea they keep trying and keep screwing it up, and maybe the frustration as a reader that being like, every time you've tried this, it's failed. So like maybe you're the problem. It's some of the hubris of time travel that if I have this ability, I can change things. And it takes them however many cycles for old Natasha to realize that maybe we can't, Yeah. And like, did no one say that 15 jumps ago? Like how many tries would it take?
Someone, but
maybe someone did.
I guess your options at that point are like, well, if we stop trying, then we just accept the worst version of things.
Yeah.
So there's no harm in continuing to try. So they think, except they're becoming more cynical and jaded about the process, which is probably tipping the scales in a negative direction.
And what you said there, I didn't even think about this until you just said that. The idea that if they stop and accept that this is how it is, it's also an acceptance that these are the people they are, that they have to accept the fact that they ended the world and that's the kind of people they are. And and so that's kind of self-realization that no, we're not bad people, and so if they ever stop trying to fix it, they have to accept the fact that they did this. And it seems at some point that like Heidi definitely accepted that, because she was on death row or whatnot. It seems at some point she had, I don't want to say given up, but had stopped trying to, like, she had accepted this. But for someone like Grady or Natasha, has a harder time accepting the idea that they were the cause of this, because that would mean that they're bad people, that they're that they're somehow flawed. And so we can't accept that. I can't accept that. If I can go back and change it, I can. And I'm going to show you, as in show myself, that I'm not this bad of a person. And so there's a level of self-delusion there, that they can't quite accept that these are the people that they are. When oftentimes they can look at Grady and be like, Grady, you've always been terrible. So they can see it in someone else, but that acceptance of maybe their own faults and misgivings is they have trouble with.
I do think there is something particularly depressing about the powerlessness of having a time machine and not being able to fix a damn thing with it.
Yeah,
I think
true.
Like you have to feel like I've got all the cards now, right?
Yeah.
When you have, so there's this hubris,
absolutely,
that goes with all sci-fi slash inventors slash, you know, um,
Mhm.
Dr. Frankenstein, or whomever, of like, I have controlled this thing,
That was
and
uncontrollable. Yep.
that was uncontrollable, that was, out of reach for humanity. Therefore, I have to be smart enough to do everything. Yeah, and I always have to have my hand on the wheel. And I
Mhm.
think that's why they have to keep going back. It's because
Failure.
they can't accept failure. They have the hubris to believe that all things are their fault, which is like it's the very, getting into like the MCU, it's a very Tony Stark size ego
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think that just
Yeah.
like everything that happens, from Iron Man 1 through Endgame, he thinks, "Oh my God, this is because of me." It's like,
Yeah.
you weren't in
Yeah.
that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the size of his genius and his ego. There is a correlation.
Yeah.
And
If I hadn't done this thing first, none of else happens. It's like, well, would it? You
right.
know?
And therefore, it's on me to come up with a plan to fix it.
Yes.
And I don't have time to explain myself to the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
or justify my actions.
Yeah. And if I can't fix it, obviously no one can. If my way doesn't work,
Correct.
there's no other way. No one else could even conceive of an option that could possibly do this. Yeah, yeah, you're right. It's hubris on every level. Because there has to be. I mean, and again, that's a common trope in a time travel story. Sorry, we should probably specify in a time travel story where the people traveling through time are the inventors of the time machine. Right, because that is different.
Right.
That is different when you're talking about something like
Time Before
either
Time.
Time Before Time or Paper Girls, where
He's like basically a cab driver.
yeah, exactly. Time Before Time, the stuff exists, and our main character is simply using it. In Paper Girls, they stumble upon it, right? But if you're Doc Brown, right? If you're in a position like I did this thing, so I should be able to use it in the way that I thought I could be able to. The reason I invented this thing, right?
Right.
If I can do this, I should be able to do the other things I want to do with it, all the things I want to do with it. And that's never the case. And having to come to grips with that, especially in a story, as we see, and I think we get some more hints into this book that is more similar, again, to Back to the Future, right? That every time they go back, they create a branch timeline. Things are a little different, and then they bail on it, and we get a new one.
And they're always worse.
Yes,
It's like, that's always the thing of like, I know what I did wrong, so now I can go back and fix it, and they just double down on the mistakes. And then it's like, but now it's twice as bad as it was before I traveled at all.
Yeah.
So now I know to everything. Right. So now I know to everything.
Two things.
Right. Yes.
That I did wrong.
Yes. Now I know two variables.
Yeah. Exactly.
And there can't be more than 5.
Yeah.
So
when the obvious answer is there's infinite variables, that the things you can't even account for, but you never see that, again, because you're blinded by your own brilliance, your own belief in yourself and your ability, because I did this great thing already. So clearly I can do other great things with it. And it just never turns out that way. It never turns out that way. And so having the characters, forcing the characters to reckon with that is the arc of those characters, right? And older Grady was never going to travel that arc, which is, I guess, why he had to die. So you're left with older Natasha being the one to travel along that route and get to a point where trying something different, trying the hands-off approach, just being, again, the inception idea of planting the most basic form, the simplest idea, the simplest version of the idea, and hoping that's enough, as opposed to, as we said prior, constantly putting their hand on the scale, being the ones to push the button, sometimes literally push the button and be like, well, this has to happen. You have to do this. And then you have to go here. And then that has to happen. And then when this happens, you did, instead of directing traffic, just like, I don't know, building a new road and seeing how it goes. That kind of extended metaphor.
Right. Or accepting that you're relatively powerless and trying to find meaning within the world as it is, rather than trying to reshape the meaning of the world in your image.
Yeah. And I think that's what Natasha kind of gets to, right? At the end.
She's like,
that's
it's not in my power to do this. What is in my power is to make Grady feel loved, and that he doesn't need to be the way way I know that 9 out of 10 times he ends up becoming. So let's roll the dice
that doesn't
on the
work,
things that are in my control.
Right?
Yeah, and if that doesn't work, exactly. Yeah,
because literally every other path hasn't worked. So I think she comes.
Or you could kill Grady. I mean, that's I assume. I guess they couldn't have tried that one.
Or killing young Grady.
Yeah, because old Grady would start to disappear like the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are using the Back to the Future logic in that way. Like he wouldn't disappear instantly. He would have like a little timeline remnant version of himself that exists for a while. But unless you go back and undo the killing of young Grady, old Grady would eventually disappear. And I'm guessing he wasn't willing to play with that variable.
Well, no, clearly, because
he didn't care enough about fixing the world that he would be willing to take himself out of the equation.
Well, no, I don't think any of them did at the time, because it wasn't just about fixing the world. It was like making sure that they fixed the world. They were around to fix it. So again, it wasn't purely it was never really altruistic. Right. It wasn't.
The only altruism was, I don't want everyone to think the world ended and it's my fault.
Yes, which there's a level of
not altruism at all. That's that's shame.
Yeah. The altruism is we're trying to make the world less bad than we know it is, which fundamentally is a good thing, right? If the world is terrible and you can at least make it a little bit less terrible, that's generally a good thing. But the motivation is solely, we need to do this. I need to be around. I'm not willing to. None of them would have been like if the older versions of themselves were told, "Hey, we can guarantee the world gets better if the 5 of you die on that hill." If the 5 of you die on that hill, you take that selfie and you all die, the world is great. Is that worth it? Would you do it? Grady definitely says no. Older Grady definitely says no. Older Heidi at that point might say yes. She might say yes for herself,
but would she be willing to sacrifice for others?
That is, So, but she's on death row. I don't know, but I think the point is that is not a bridge any of them would have crossed or would have considered. Because Grady definitely would have considered that. I don't think Natasha would have considered that. Maybe Natasha, after a certain number of cycles, because I think the way that she is shown that there's a level of logic to her. Where she's pretty methodical. I think we see that in the younger version of herself too, when she goes and works with Daniel at Aspire or at the bio agriculture company, whatever. Maybe she might get to that eventually, but it would take a while. But the idea that they are sacrificing anything for the greater good, I think that in general is farcical, because if they were told that ultimatum that this will guarantee that the world that you saw, how terrible it was, never happens, would you do it? I don't think they do. I don't think they would, because they're not that altruistic, And look, a lot of people probably wouldn't be either. But these characters specifically are not meant to be that virtuous.
If someone told me, that if some, divine light came and told me that, like, hey, the world will be solved, politically, sustainably, the hungry will be fed, genocide will end, global warming will end, all of these other things, but you and Alex and all of your blood family members have to die. Are you going to go for it? And it's like, well, how reliable of a source is this? Like you're need to do your own research, and critical thinking always kicks in more when it directly affects you.
Flip side, what if someone came to you now and be like, no. You and your entire family have to die. Not now. They have to die 20 years ago. You have to go back.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because you know how the world is. So you know the world is already bad, but you're saying that you have to go back in time and end it then, and that, I mean, my first question would be like, well, can I get a little, like a bullet point list of what that ripple effect is?
Right. Does it result in a Bengals Super Bowl anywhere in the or an increase in the Reds salary cap?
Do the Reds win it all? How many championships do we have there?
Cincinnati in question.
Out of curiosity, just
in this wild
know.
Butterfly effect.
Yeah.
And
because if that's the cherry on top, then humanity surviving. Pretty good incentive, but like, if you're telling me the Reds like rip off 4 straight World Series,
but they'll do it. Yeah.
Did you ever watch? My friends will be happy. Okay, maybe so.
Did you ever watch The Good Place?
Hmm.
When Jason is talking to Ted Danson's character, and he's like,
"Oh yeah,
to the Jacksonville Jaguars never won the Super Bowl." He's like, I can't see into the future, but no. I feel like that's how our question would go.
It probably would. I would.
I don't have any future foreknowledge, but no.
But no, yeah. But but again. So I'm not saying I'm criticizing the characters for being like, oh, how selfish, not willing to sacrifice themselves for all humanity.
They're a normal level of selfish in that sense.
Yes, that congrats, that makes them people.
Yes, they're human characters.
They make you like everybody else.
If it were 4 Vulcans and a human, it would be a very different discussion and outcome.
Yeah, and if they were willing to do that, they wouldn't be in this position to begin with.
Right.
If they were the kind of people that were that altruistic, they wouldn't have ended the war. They wouldn't have made the choices, which were ultimately selfish choices, as we've seen. Right. The things that they did to get in the positions that they achieved in the future were ultimately selfish choices. They thought they were doing them for the good of everyone. And in a lot of ways, in the short term, maybe they were, but ultimately they were about personal gain. I discovered this thing that did this great thing. I became a leader of people and ascended to this high office. You did all these things and achieved great personal success. For the most part, all 5 of them did. They're not predisposed to be those kinds of people. So, again, that makes them as flawed as any person would be. That gives them a level of realism in terms of kind of when they're faced with this supernatural conundrum of dealing with the future version of yourself. I do think these characters react in a way that would be consistent, I would think, with the way that regular people would react in our world if this scenario took place. Right?
Yeah.
That there's the ones that would be totally skeptical. There's the ones that would buy in completely. There's the ones, that would, try to deny it or demand more proof and dig deeper into it, be inquisitive about it. That's what I would expect would happen in the quote unquote real world if this scenario existed.
Yeah, I think so too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, any other notes? I have been resisting the urge, working very, very hard not to reveal that we have already had a conversation with Joshua.
Joshua Hale, Fialkov.
And I've tried not to let that, I had written my notes for Volume 4 before talking to him.
Same.
So as ideally not to let it color. And there are a few things I would love to say right now, but they're all things I know in light of that interview. So I'm going to let people find that out for themselves next week.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great conversation about the book and about life, and
such an amazing guy.
And there was some really cool stuff there. We talk a little bit about the ending and just kind of larger things about kind of a view of the world, kind of a 30,000 foot view stuff, which it's really great. So really looking forward to that, sharing that with everybody next week. But yeah, I don't have any other notes here. I think just in the end, I mean, I would ask the question to you now, because I don't think you really answered it. Just I'm not going to ask you to rank this ending amongst all of the books you've covered, because I've lost track of what that number is. But I mean, how do you feel? Just if you want to even go like Siskel and Ebert, kind of like, did they land the plane on this one? Was it a little turbulent? You know, I don't think it's a miss. Again, I don't think it's a perfect ending. But how do you feel about? I would say the way at the end
things converged and how satisfactory that is, I would rank about on par with Kill or Be Killed, which is to say pretty favorable. Like Kill or Be Killed had a big twist ending, and things started to get a little crazier as the book went along, and I was guessing and guessing and guessing. The actual like end beat itself of her just going to young Grady, saying something like gutsy and earnest and truthful, and then just kind of casting her lot with that and just saying, whatever happens as a result of this earnest plea to Grady is my fate and the fate of the rest of the world. I'm not doing anything else to interfere. Like, I love that so much that I think it lifts the rest of the ending, which, they kind of dropping story bombs, left and right. We talked about how much more slowly some of these things probably would have been revealed, other time travelers in play, in the death of Grady. So some of the more rushed elements there, I think, were made up for by the fact that, like, it ended exactly on the tip, he wanted to land on, which, it's like, if you get a little rocky turbulence or whatever from headwind and, but your pilot hits the runway and, lands exactly the way he's supposed to, you forgive a little bit of in-air turbulence. I think it's in the top half of endings we've covered, but it's not like elite tier.
No. I have one last question that came to me as you were talking about that, and I was looking at the last couple of pages there again.
Which I should probably do. I have it up in front of me.
At the end, after old Natasha gives gives Grady her big speech and gives him a kiss and walks away,
he says, "I love you." To his friend,
to Billy. Yeah, Billy, is there at any point, do you think that young version of Grady clocks in any way that person he talked to was a version of his friend?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Like not even like in the farthest recesses of his brain.
Squinting for it. I mean, he may someday, he may in 10 years.
Oh, okay, sure.
Have a permanent memory of this woman in the woods, and then as he sees his friend getting older and older, like, wait a second.
But I'm not saying I saw it or didn't see it. I was just curious. I was just looking at it again because obviously, he makes a comment when she first says, like, "Hey, you look like my friend." The idea that like this could have been a relative of Natasha's, obviously, because it is her. But you didn't pick up anything in there that even like the farthest recess of his brain that there was some spark of actual recognition. Because I don't think I did either. But as you were talking, I was looking through it. I didn't see it, so I was curious.
It made you want to. It made you want to ask that question. But I think these last 3 pages are amazing. Yeah, their little conversation, her very small speech. This could get very wordy in the hands of a lesser writer. Overly preachy, overly didactic. Then you go to the next page and you worry, like he tries to act on it immediately by saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, listen, I don't know you all that well or whatever, but I
Yeah.
love you." And Billy says, "What?" And he says, "Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing at all." Which
Yeah.
means, was that his try? And now he's back to being Grady again, like lesson
Yeah.
not learned.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Or
then
was
you
the
get
fact
this
that he,
poem,
yeah.
the Fate by Ralph Waldo Emerson,
Mhm.
which am I consider myself a reasonably intelligent person, and I suck at poetry. Like I'm so bad. I'm so bad at enjoying poetry. I have to
Never been a
work.
poetry guy either. Never been a
I have to
poetry
work
guy.
so hard. Like I want it. I want to want it. But I have trouble just sitting down with a book of poems. I'm like, can we just say in prose what we mean? Like
Yeah.
it's actually easier.
Yeah.
And I think that's not the point. But you know,
Well, yeah, that's literally not the
deep,
point.
deep in the man sits fast his fate to mold his fortune's meaner great. Um, I think you know just based on the opening lines and kind of that poem out of context, I don't know what other poems he was writing or if it was about a particular person or situation or something like that. Sure, sounds like um, you're not going to move the needle on Grady.
Well, well,
Deep in the
but I
man
think
sits fast his fate to mold his fortune's meaner great.
I think that, but that goes back to the heart of what Natasha said to him, which just like the most important thing is that you know what's right and wrong, and everyone else, your friends, everyone's going to try to pull you in some direction, but you know what's right and wrong. And so, like, what she's basically saying, like, live your truth, listen to your gut, don't be led astray. And so I think maybe that's what that poem is saying, that inside everyone, it's like it's inside you, there are two wolves, right? Which
Sure,
one do you
yeah.
feed?
If you're reading it that way, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This idea that he, because saying that Grady has the capacity for both, and I think maybe what she's saying is all the versions that she knows is that at every step of the way, as Grady advanced up the political ladder, he compromised who he was, as we said earlier, for a level of self gain, right?
Yeah. Now, what's the West Wing quote? Shouted down. His better angels were shouted down by whatever.
Yeah,
Toby.
his demons, in a fight with his better angels. So yeah, I think that's what they're trying to get across here, and yeah, it is that mere attempt by Grady there. Was that all it was, or was that simply a step to show that maybe he has changed a little bit? That maybe
he internalized what she said.
It wasn't, it wasn't the time for that now, but him simply saying it and listening to his own truth, his understanding of the world, his belief in what's true and what's right and what he knows, and not lying to himself anymore, not lying to anybody else. Maybe that's that first baby step is all it takes there. And so I again, I choose to see that as a little more of a hopeful ending. That this at least has a chance of working, because you're affecting Grady the person, not Grady's actions, but actually who he is at his core, or at least reminding him the kind of person he is at his core.
Right. Yeah.
And to hold true to that, and not give in to the whims and desires of outside forces who want something from him. That he's enough of a moral compass himself, and that if he follows that, maybe things get better. Maybe that's enough, and maybe he still then can rise to a level of Congress and then the White House, whatever it is. But he's now on a path of being a better person, of being a good person, and maybe that's enough. Maybe it means he doesn't go for public office at all, and maybe that's enough. But whatever it is, him being true and honest with himself is what Natasha thinks is the key, or the potential key for changing this. And so I think that poem is it seems to say that, that there are these possibilities, that those possibilities exist within all of us, that everyone has this choice.
That is which is, on one hand, that is the assumption that the entire book was operating under.
Yes.
It's a matter of whether they're doubling down on that or if they're giving up on it and saying, Grady is who Grady is. I tried my best to try to turn him around, but
or if it's about it's the premise the book is on, but what it's showing is how do we get there? How do we achieve that? Can you get it there by force, which is what we saw this whole book about? Can you change the action? Can you change the future or the person by dictating what they do, or by allowing them to find their own path, but maybe pointing them in the better direction? Instead of steering them, turn left, turn right, go here, make a left here, turn around. Instead of doing all of that, maybe the better option is to trust the person, but just make sure that they understand that they believe in themselves as much as other people can as well. So maybe it's more about the path in which we choose to try to manifest those different options in ourselves. Again, direct action versus more like passive action. Just getting good people and letting good people be good and reminding them that they are good. And hopefully that's enough to hold them off from whatever outside corruption, may affect them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a more hopeful note to end on than how I had taken it. So we'll go with that. And I'm usually the more hopeful one. In terms of tending toward the optimistic reading of things.
Yeah, that is fair.
So, anyway, well, that was encouraging. And a really solid to great ending of a very, very strong series.
Yeah.
There were a
lot of good ideas here. Yeah.
And no filler issues. Nothing where I felt like they're wasting my time. And I usually feel that way once something is approaching 20 issues, that there's been some diversion that has lost my interest, if only nominally. So to have, just a tight 19 issues is a real gift.
Yep.
All right. Well, we don't know which book will be up next, but we do know that next week will be our interview with Joshua Hale Fialkov. I believe I reached out to Joe. If not, I'll reach out again just to see if we can complete the set, so to speak.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, but we definitely have an interview with Joshua coming next week again that we were so lucky to get, and he was great with his time, and it's a really, really great listen. We can't wait to share it with y'all.
Yeah, and I suspect that there is a chance that if there's a Joe interview, it might just be Alex and Joe, since as we record this, I have a new baby 4 days from now. So
that is true.
I'm trying to pitch that to people as literally any time of the day or night I'll be awake to do an interview. I don't know if that's as appealing as I'm trying to make it sound. It certainly isn't to you. So
well, always available. Has different meanings. So
true. All right. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week for our interview.
Peace.